This is Porco Revival, Episode 1. My daily driver is dead. This is a 1967 Alfa Romeo Giulia 1300 Ti named Porco Rosso, and my long-suffering daily driver. I've always taken a hands-off, let sleeping dogs lie kind of approach to this particular car, partly because I've always had so many other projects that needed my time and attention, and also because I've always just thought that it simply had too many problems for me to really even worry about it, and that it would be easiest to just build a new engine and gearbox and brakes and differential for it someday. And that for now, it wasn't even worth tuning or improving. It has a bad engine and I can't do anything about it. My attitude was that as long as it didn't throw a connecting rod out the side of the block, I was happy. Poor fuel economy and oil consumption be damned. And I did get lots of miles in with this engine, all over the country, and they were often rather rough miles. But last week, the gods of speed and noise forced my hand. The clutch has failed, and that new 2000 engine is still a bare block sitting on my workbench, so I must give Porco some time and attention after all. The clutch is slipping badly. The change from being perfectly fine to not gripping at all happened in an instant, so the friction disc is probably fine, but I suspect that the pressure plate has failed. In this footage, my foot is off and away from the clutch pedal. But even the slightest acceleration causes the engine to rev freely, as if the gearbox was in neutral. First up, I'm going to remove the radiator. It's currently filled with tap water, because this recently overheated in heavy traffic on a hot day and I refilled it at the side of the road. In this harsh light of day, with the radiator out of the way, I can see just how terrible the oil leaks on this engine really are. With the car up on the lift, the underside is not very confidence-inspiring either. It's very, very oily, and the exhaust has some cracks, and although this car is fairly rust-free, apart from the driver's side footwell and the battery tray, it seems the chassis is starting to fatigue and crack in a few key places. So in the not-too-distant future, Porco will require a proper rebuild. But for now, I need this car back on the road sooner than later. Before I lower the lift again, I'm going to remove the clutch slave cylinder. Yes, this car has a hydraulic clutch, more on that later. Drop the exhaust out the way, split the prop shaft, and remove the main gearbox mount. I find that placing jack stands under the rear axle and getting the tail of the car up as high as I can with the nose down low gives me the best access to remove the engine and gearbox as a unit. Removing the gear selector from the top of the gearbox helps prevent it catching the transmission tunnel on its way out. Now let's see how much this engine fights me. It's definitely much trickier getting the engine out of a Giulia sedan than it is getting it out of a Spider, and alone this is pretty tough. Out in the light, this engine looks terrible. It's covered in a thick layer of oil and dirt and grease. It's so bad, I don't think it's coming from just a few bad seals. There are clearly more issues than just a few tired oil seals and gaskets, so I'll have to investigate further. The entire engine bay is covered in oil as well. It must be getting flung off the crankshaft pulley. Because this car is so low, I've been hitting the oil sump fairly often. So often that the oil plug has now been deformed and I can't get a socket to fit on it. So I'm going to have to use a hammer and chisel to remove it. The oil looks really filthy and metallic. I don't like what I see on the drain plug either. and I don't think the main bearings on this engine are in very good shape. It doesn't knock or have any bearing noise, but I also don't have a working oil pressure gauge on the dashboard, so I'm not sure if it holds decent pressure at all, but I suspect that the answer is it doesn't. With the gearbox removed, I can get to the heart of my troubles here, the clutch. The fingers of the diaphragm spring on the pressure plate have dropped inwards, which is a sign of failure. With the pressure plate itself removed, I can see that the friction plate has been spinning freely and is badly worn. All of this is to be expected, but the reason for the failure is this: cracks in the diaphragm spring. Now this is kind of entirely my fault. It's the result of a modification I made in 2018. I changed the clutch on this car from a mechanical cable clutch to a hydraulic clutch, but I didn't change the pedals. The mechanical pedal has a longer action than the hydraulic pedal, and you can see the difference between the two of them here. But my car has a dash-mounted handbrake, and the cable runs between the floor pan and the pushrod of the clutch pedal, and the shorter hydraulic pedal won't fit with the handbrake cable there. The thing to do would be to move the handbrake to the usual position between the front seats, but this car has a bench front seat, so I can't move the handbrake without finding a new set of seats and fabricating new runners, and I decided to just live with the odd pedal feel. And all that means that the clutch has been overextending, and over time it's cracked the mainspring in the pressure plate and damaged the spring in the master cylinder. So that's why Porco is dead. Years of neglect and a time bomb modification. But now it's time to start getting it all right again. Well, as right as you can in this short time window that I have, just enough to get Porco through another couple of years. I'm going to end this episode here. I have a huge amount of work ahead of me with Project Porco, so I'll be back weekly with episodes until this car is back on the road. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on Friday.